BNEWS Special Report. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my director today, Robert Paris. Our guest today is Chairman of the Burlington Ways and Means Committee, Roger Riggs. Welcome to the program, Roger.
Welcome, Phil. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us. Roger is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon in, I believe it's in Pittsburgh. He's got a undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. He's currently employed as a software engineer at Oracle. He's in his 10th year in on the Ways and Means Committee and serving as his second consecutive year as chairman. So, Roger, normally the Ways and Means labors in somewhat an obscure fashion. It looks like this may be a year-round job.
Well, it's true. We're not completely obscure. We've been televised, all the meetings are open, and we've been televised on BCAT for quite some number of years. Frequently, the budget's fairly ordinary. At the end of this year, it's gotten a bit more interesting.
Well, the Ways and Means Chairman is the single most important volunteer position in town government. So let's start from the beginning. What exactly is the role of the Ways and Means Committee in the town?
So the Ways and Means Committee is chartered by the Burlington bylaws as the Finance Committee. And the Ways and Means reviews budgets and all sort of financial matters and makes recommendations to town meeting about the financial matters. In addition, they have broad oversight of sort of all processes and activities in the town. And if anything looks sort of askew, Ways and Means Committee has the obligation and the opportunity to review and look into things.
Okay, it's a 15-member panel. What is the role of the chairman?
Chairman is basically like anyone to sort of lead and set up the meetings. Some of it's fairly ordinarily, routinely administrative, scheduling the activities, getting people in meetings on time, getting materials sent out. I spend some time talking with the town administrator and the town accountant about keep abreast of activities, financial activities in the town. And so it's sort of generally, make the committee work smoothly and produce good information.
Now, you're a member essentially of the town financial management team in the development of the budget and the budget guidelines. Tell us about that process, establishing guidelines.
Right. So the overall budget process, you can probably find an overall outline of it in every year's budget. It starts in the fall with some informal meetings among departments and boards and the schools to sort of uncover potential opportunities and concerns about the forthcoming year. Potentially, since a lot of labor costs are part of part of the budget, it's like where are the current labor contracts? What's the general environment expected to be? Also on the financial team are the assessor and the other, so we look at a little bit about sources of revenue and the financial outlook more generally. Those informal meetings turn around into a presentation by the administration to Ways and Means and to the selectmen with some options for a recommendation for a particular guideline percentage. The Ways and Means reviews that and helps choose the particular guideline for the year, taking into account various considerations about revenue and costs and things that need to be done in the town to keep it moving and supplying. Usually the target for many years has been sort of a level set of services, where even level service framework frequently is easy to understand in terms of trash and water and infrastructure. Sometimes with respect to council on aging or recreation, where the population in town is varying, the consideration level service may actually mean that there's more people to serve. It's especially true in the council on aging.
Yeah, the snow budget can be different as well.
Yes, and
now, we talk about the budget in total like it's one thing, but it's 800 or 900 pages and presentations and various things, and it's not one budget for department. There's numerous departments. How do you handle the apportionment of the responsibilities of the committee?
Right. So as you mentioned, there are 15 members in the committee. There are 5 subcommittees. There's a public safety committee that handles police and fire. There's a committee that handles the DPW and the Department of Recreation Department and their boards. There's 2 town hall committees, one of which oversees 11 departments and the other oversees budgets for 15 departments. And I'm forgetting one.
I think the schools are in
And
there.
the school subcommittee, which is actually the largest committee. The school budget is a huge piece of the overall job. So the subcommittees are responsible for, they get portioned out to the subcommittees.
So how does the subcommittee system work?
Well, the subcommittees, frequently for year to year, there's pretty good carryover of the same individuals and their interests in the subcommittees that they're working on. But committee members can express interest in working on a particular subcommittee. Most of the subcommittees are just 2 members, except for schools, which is 5. And they, once the budget's out, the subcommittee takes over working with the departments or the boards to review all the budgets within their purview. Poking and looking into the questions about, what's new, are there new employees proposed, what's, any particular concerns or expenditures for the year. Those subcommittee reviews come back to the full Ways and Means Committee, where each budget is then reviewed with the subcommittee and the department heads, or boards, so that everybody on the committee gets a full view of the contents of the budget and any particular novel issues for this budget season.
So there's a multi-level review process even before it gets to the subcommittee?
Yes, right. And in many cases, I think the selectmen has a parallel process. They also review all the budgets independently. So we get independent opinions of budgets. Ways and Means, they're all volunteers. They're all selected from the residents, and I think more than half of them are town meeting members by the bylaw. So they represent the community more than the administration in terms of their interests.
Okay, how experienced is the committee? Have you got a lot of in-place institutional knowledge in the committee?
Absolutely. Didn't nail down the oldest committee member, but I think we have committee members.
Let's not do that, Roger.
Sorry, the longest serving. Because I think we know who the longest. Yes. So Phil, you didn't mention that you were also on the committee. So in full disclosure, as you've also have a long history with the town. So yes, we have, I think most of the committee has probably been on Ways and Means for more than 10 years. And also in town meeting for a similar amount of time. The turnover is a little bit low, but we have a couple of members who are a year or 2 into it, and so we're getting fresh eyes on from time to time. And anybody who's interested, I think, should talk to the moderator, because the moderator fills openings and does sort of annually does reappointments as necessary.
Okay, so the moderator appoints to the committee, and then it's your responsibility to appoint to the subcommittees and portion the work that way.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the budget this year. You were knee deep into the budget beginning November, December, and many of the budget reviews had already been accomplished, and now suddenly we're in lockdown and things look a lot different. So going forward, what do you see happening here?
Well, I think you're right. A lot of the budgets were built based on this sort of level services approach. And largely in the town, I think, that's the right thing to do. We have to worry about the revenue side, but in terms of the services that we want to provide to the residents, we have all these critical services: police, fire, water, trash, all of those things have to continue. So maybe there's some tweaks that could be done around the edges, but by and large, things, we basically have to do what we've been doing before. There are a lot of discretionary things in the budget, and so I think so far we have voted on all of the town side budgets and approved them, and I don't think anybody has any remorse about doing that. I think, as the town administrator has noted in his comments, that it's a little bit late to try to jigger the plan to try to figure out where you can make changes. Paul has also been very clear that he's going to be actually spending money as conservatively as possible until the situation unfolds more clearly. So
Well, let's
yeah,
clarify the schedule, clarify the calendar for a moment.
right.
So coming up June 30th is the end of fiscal year 20, correct? And
Yep.
then we'll begin fiscal year 21 on July 1st. So as the budget stands now for the current year, we have no problems.
Correct. Even though local receipts for the last quarter will come in a little bit lower than we might have hoped, they're actually not lower than the projections that were made when the 2020 budget was created. We're also in very good shape, as you will have heard, in both free cash and the stabilization account. Each of them has about 9 million plus or minus, and that's a very good position for any town to be in.
So the possibility of running a deficit in fiscal 20 is out of the question at this point.
I don't think that'll be a problem.
And going forward, what are some of the steps that the cautionary steps that you're involved with going forward with town management?
Well, I think the even though we need to provide sort of level services, a big percentage of the budget is staffing. And so without cutting staff people, I think 85% of the budget is personnel. And those are the people who really provide the service day to day. The discretionary things are probably more along the lines of operationally, there aren't very many things we can stop doing to provide services. There are some sort of one-time things in the warrant article end of things, where warrant articles are one-time expenses, where you decide to do a project or not. And I think we haven't reviewed those yet. I think those will get reconsidered as we get to that part of the budget.
So those are fully discretionary going into next fiscal year. I think there's about 3 million on the warrant going into fiscal 21, whenever we get to the town meeting.
Yeah, I don't know what the number will be down to. I think so. Part of what Ways and Means does, along with the administration, is project an amount of free cash that we would like to spend on warrant articles. And I think this year it was just under 4 million. Between the school, it's usually split about 50-50 between the schools and townside projects, whether it's vehicle replacement or I guess there's a playground resurfacing, which is sort of a safety issue. There's a pretty wide set of projects there. Those are discretionary, both in terms of what is authorized, expenditures are authorized, and then even if they're authorized, the town and the school still have discretion to not spend the money. And that's the approach that I think that Paul Sagarino has mentioned a couple of times, is that even if we authorize the expenditures to keep doing what we need to do for level services, they may not spend the money. So all the schedule sort of lines up to town meeting approving a budget, which this year will be town meeting will start June 10th. So very close to the end of the year. We have another town meeting in September. So in another 4 months after the May town meeting, both the town and Ways and Means will have an opportunity to make adjustments. There can be possibilities to pull money back out of budgets or to not spend the money. There are a couple of big things built into the budget that could be pulled back. For example, we have a policy plan to fund the post-employment benefits line item, which is 900,000, I think, or something.
And that's the post-employment. That's a projected deficit of health benefits for retirees going forward.
Yes, right. And we've been, by policy, we have been contributing and adding money to that trust account for 4 or 5 years now, and it really needs to continue. But if money was really crunched, we could decide we're not going to make that contribution to the trust fund this year. I don't think it'll come to that, but and as you've mentioned a couple of times, and well, not in this interview, but we're all cautious that the revenues from various sources will not meet our normal operating expenses. And so, you want to have an eye out for things that you cannot do. Money you cannot spend.
Paul Sagarino had a presentation Monday night along with John Denizio, the assistant town administrator,
Right.
relative to caution going forward. And I guess the number one caution, as you mentioned, is on the revenue stream. Now, those consist obviously of real estate taxes, but the hotel tax, the meals tax, the state aid, and the water and sewer revenue are all considerations going forward. Let's talk about water and sewer revenue. 10 or 9 of the 10 largest water consumers, our water customers, are essentially locked down. Is this a revenue generator, or is this a pass-through to the Water Resources Authority? How does that money work?
Let's see. So I think the water and sewer operations are supported maybe 60-40 between the operating budget and the revenues from the water and sewer bills. So there's part of it that is in the operating budget, and part of it that's paid directly, sort of as you mentioned, pass through from the water bills. I kind of expect the residential side water increase revenues to go up a little bit because more people are at home. But you're right, the commercial building, the commercial water use and sewer will be down. I think a lot of it from the consumption point of view is a pass through to the MWRA. We have to pay them to dispose of. That's the sewer side. The sewer side.
Now, on the hotel and the meals tax, let's assume the governor's extended the lockdown period to May 18th. So at this point, it looks like the fourth quarter is going to be almost a complete wash. How do you anticipate how rapidly this is going to re-ramp, considering we might still have social distancing in the restaurant business, for instance?
I don't have a model for that. I mean, I think that people just takeout and delivery has probably produced a trickle of revenue on that source. But you're not going to go to the Capitol Grill or the Escadrille and have a really nice evening if you're picking it up at the curb.
I told the missus I'd be going out every night once this thing is locked down. She said, you better think about that again.
So I don't want to project how fast things will recover. I'm sure people will get out as quickly as they can if they have the opportunity. But the other important point, especially with the meals tax, is that most of the revenue that we get from that is not, we budget that very low in terms of expectations. So in most years, almost everything we get from the revenue from the meals tax is bonus money. It goes into free cash. It's not something that the operating budget relies on to balance out. So, it's not good that it's lost. It'll mean there are projects we can't do in the future, but it's not operational support. It doesn't support the operations. The property taxes and the commercial taxes are more likely to have an impact on operations.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Once again, you can't project what type of business failures we're going to have, occupancy rates, can't project any of that, but we can project that it's not likely to be a problem in fiscal 21 because of the values that have already been set, correct?
Right. I mean, so in terms of the overall budget process, right? So we develop a guideline, the budget gets developed, town meeting votes on the budget in May or June. So that budget amount is what has to be funded from various sources for FY21. In November, October, November, so I guess in the state certifies free cash in October and November. In November, the assessor goes through a cycle of evaluating property values and proposes, or the selectmen have to choose a property tax rate that will produce the revenue needed to cover the budget that was approved in May.
Right. Based on the values that were established January 1?
I forget the cycle of the assessor cycle, but okay, say it's January 1. And they will take into account at that point in November the expectations for state aid, local receipts, to date. There's some other sources of revenue besides property tax that, by November, you get a better picture of what the state's going to do for their part. I'm sure the state will try to be as supportive as possible, but they also have budgetary constraints.
Well, is that a worst case scenario? Really, we have declining revenues on those 4 categories. Well, we wouldn't have it in property tax, but water, sewer, meals tax, hotel tax, and then subsequently a drop in Chapter 90 roadway funds and the cherry sheet?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're pushing the worst case. I'm not sitting on the worst case side of things at the moment, but we're going to have to see how it plays out. Yes, all of those things will probably come in lower than expectations, since the past 4 or 5 years have been really good in Burlington. We have, excellent businesses, good location. I don't know that it could have been a lot better than it's been. So we were sort of in the most positive situation we could think of till, a couple of months ago. And now it's quite a bit less. So
the best case scenario, however, is really the current situation. We've got 20 million in free cash and stabilization available to us. We have continued building permits, which I think produced somewhere in the order of 3 million in revenue this past year. And we don't have any valuation issues probably until fiscal 22. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think that's probably true. I mean, I'll defer to, the individuals who have to actually produce the assessments and the values. So this problem may actually take a while to reveal itself in the details and the specifics.
And I think that strategy for you, I guess the next meeting is May 6th, right, which warrant articles will be taken up. How solid do you think the June 10th meeting date is for town meeting, and as well as the town election?
Well, I think I don't have any worries about the town election. I mean, the town clerk, Amy Warfield, has done a good job of trying to promote absentee ballots for everyone. The state has passed legislation to make that possible so that everybody can vote remotely, and if they choose to do so, that's great. I think the logistics of town meeting are still being worked out. I talked to the moderator probably a week or 2 ago, and they were still figuring out with, how to have a meeting of 122 representatives and all the department heads and everybody else. And I think in June, we will still be respecting social distancing. And so the question is, sort of logistically, how can that work out? There is a provision in state law that if we don't pass a new budget, the town can continue to operate on what they call a 1/12 budget, month at a time, until we can pass a budget. So I'm sort of positively hopeful that we'll figure out how to do town meeting and move forward with the new slate of things. But if not, it's not a cliff. It's just, we use a different set of numbers to move forward.
This is somewhat reminiscent of the passage of Proposition 2.5, when we had meeting after meeting, town meeting, as the budget shifted and changed during that entire year's period.
Right.
Now, in closing, just give us a general overview of what your thoughts are going forward here. Is an enormous challenge, a not so enormous challenge? You're going to be working on this all year long before we even start the next budget cycle. What do you see going forward? And what, if any, rapid progression of progress do we make?
Well, I think as slowly as sort of the disease and the recovery happen, I don't think it's going to take us by surprise. So I don't think there's any particular urgency or, surprises around the town. A lot of the conditions from the revenue side are going to take a while to develop in any detail, so we have to keep an eye on those. We have an excellent financial team in the town, between the town accountant and the town administrator, the assessor, and the selectmen are all, this is clearly their top priority. And we have good advice from various sources.
And we have
Ways
all
and Means.
seasoned professionals in those positions.
Exactly. I mean, I think even the new treasurer is seasoned in the banking business, so it's not a completely new task.
Well, he has 20 years experience, I think, on the boards too,
Yes.
as well. So he's no stranger to the community.
Right. So I think it'll be a little bit of a slow roll probably. And yes, it may hurt a little bit as we go along, if we have to make tough choices on things. I didn't mention
one last question for you, which is when push comes to shove, we're AAA rated, so the borrowing market is available to us. What is the likelihood that we might be bundling some of these things and borrowing?
I think it's not a bad option to borrow instead of using free cash. Historically, we have shied away from actually using free cash for operational budgets, because as soon as you start depending on money that was raised, that was sort of discretionary, that you didn't expect to have, you build something into the budget that next year you have to fund it anyway. So to dig into free cash, we'd really need to, it would have to be sort of an exceptional thing. The finance team has been very good over the years about having a very smooth, very predictable growth and conditions for growth in the town. And I think that's laudable. It's one of the reasons we're as in strong a position as we are today.
Okay, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank Chairman Roger Riggs for joining us. Thank you, Roger. Yep. And also thanks to Robert Paris, who is our director today. Thank you for joining us.